been spreading rumors about my husband's great aunt for the last 150 years, and the rumors are so extreme that even the band Megadeth wrote a song about her. She is still a hot topic in paranormal podcasts to this day, and she died in 1880. There are so many urban legends and myths about this girl that she will never get to rest in peace. Back in the 1950s, the urban legends got so bad that the kids would break into the cemetery that she was buried in so that they could jump over her grave 3 times, because one of the legends said that if you did that, she would come out and haunt you. And then they ended up vandalizing her tombstone so often that they had to lock it up, and her tombstone is still locked up to this day. And this all started because the original myth about her was that she was part of a coven of witches that was terrorizing the town of Petersburg, Minnesota, and the townspeople got so sick of it that they ran the coven out. But then Mary Jane, my husband's great aunt, she came back to the town, so the townspeople beheaded her and buried her with her axe, which is honestly a very riveting story, but it's also entirely false. I'm a genealogist. I have all of my husband's family records, including Mary Jane's health and death records. She got diphtheria. She fought for her life for 4 days before diphtheria took it away from her. She was not some witch who got beheaded. She was just an 18-year-old girl who got sick and died from it. But the rumors got so out of control that literally the band Megadeth wrote a super popular song about her. And this is incredibly inconvenient for me because I really fucking hate Megadeth, and I have kids with my husband. One day my kids are going to grow up and realize that there's a popular Megadeth song about their great aunt Mary Jane, and I'm probably going to have to listen to it. Beefing with my husband's grandma Karen over green beans since 2009, and back when I was in college, his mom gave me all of their family history records because that's what I went to school for. Plus, I have children with my husband, so she felt like I was entitled to know their family history. And when I opened the file for the first time, I realized that they definitely had a family genealogist before me because the tree was amazing. All of the branches were filled out, all of the sources were cited. It was really immaculate, except for when I got to that specific grandma's side of the tree. I noticed that with her father, it was entirely bare. He was a dead end. His parents weren't linked. His siblings weren't linked. There weren't very many sources. And when I went to go check the sources on him, I noticed there were no records actually linked to him before he was in his 20s and had moved to Idaho. So I started digging into that so I could start filling out the rest of his tree, only to discover that he actually just didn't exist. That's why there was no records for that. And so I was like, well, who are you? Because you're obviously not Philip Miller, right? And so luckily I had already given my children DNA tests, and I started going through their DNA, and I kept seeing this last name Zorn, which I had never heard before. My husband and I have been together since we were 15, never once heard this last name. I started digging into this family, and I figured out exactly where his great grandpa fits into this family. And I was like, well, what made you so desperate to shed this last name and move and pretend that you were not related to these people, right? And so I started digging into the newspaper archives, and that's when I realized that crazy really does attract crazy, because I somehow married the Montana Slayer's great nephew. One time my husband was missing a bunch of calls from a local number, and it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. So he screenshot and he sent it to me. He was like, do you know who this is? And I was like, I have no idea, but I'm absolutely going to find out because I'm super nosy. So then I went on a hunt to see if I could figure out who the registered owner of that number was. However, I discovered that it was a prepaid phone purchased at a shop from my husband's hometown. And I was like, how weird. Who from his hometown is trying to call him at 2 o'clock in the morning? But I knew I was never going to track down the owner of a prepaid phone. So then I messaged my friend Caroline, who lives in a different state. And I was like, hey, will you text this number and try to start a conversation with them and see if you can get their name or get them to send you a photo of them? So she spent like a day flirting with this random number before he decided to send her a photo of himself, and she sent the photo to me, and then I showed it to my husband, and he's like, I've never seen that dude before in my life. So then I go and I run it on Google reverse image search, and I discover the photo is linked to a gay hookup site in my husband's hometown. This guy has a profile on there. And so then I go back to my husband and I'm like, excuse me, sir, do you have something to tell me? And he's like, absolutely not. Still never seen that guy before a day in my life. So then I go to my husband's niece, who's about our age, and she still lives in his hometown, and I send her the photo, and I'm like, hey, do you know who this random guy is? He keeps calling Jacob. And she's like, yeah, that's not a random guy. That's Leslie's husband. And that's when I discovered that my husband's estranged sister has a gay husband. What do y'all think estranged means? Why is this so hard to believe? No, my husband would not recognize his brother-in-law. When I said he was estranged from his sister, I meant that my husband has not seen or spoken to his sister in nearly 20 years. He actually has 2 older estranged sisters. One he hasn't seen or spoken to in over 20 years, but this one specifically he has not seen or spoken to since 2008. At that point in time, she had an entirely different husband. I know, I was there, I met him. So no, he would not recognize her current husband that she married 15 years after he last saw her. You could actually take my husband and both of his sisters' husbands, you could put them all in line together at Walmart. My husband would have no idea he was standing next to a man who was married to his sister. That is how uninvolved he is in his sister's lives. We don't live in the same place as these people. In 2008, my husband moved out of his hometown and moved out here to be with me. And when he did this, he pretty much just stopped talking to everybody from that place. There's no bad blood. There's no beef. It's nothing like that. He's just just a very antisocial person. He doesn't have any forms of social media. So when he left that place, he just stopped talking to his sisters. They never really had that sibling bond anyways. They are half siblings. They share a father who passed away in 1998, and they are 20 years older than my husband. They were adults when he was born. They didn't grow up together, anything like that. So he just doesn't keep track of their lives. I also don't keep track of their lives. I do talk to his nieces from his oldest sister because they're our age and we get along very well, but we don't really yap about his sisters, except for when the second oldest sister has some sort of drama in her life. Then we will gossip about that. But aside from that, he does not keep up with what's going on in his sisters' lives whatsoever. Husband's dad died young, leaving my mother-in-law to be a very young widow. She was still in college while she was trying to raise all of her children. So obviously she was struggling. My husband grew up in poverty, and he had a cousin who didn't. He had a cousin who came from a very well-off family that he was very jealous of, because basically this cousin had everything that he had ever wanted in his childhood. My husband is huge on extreme sports. He's always been big into extreme sports, and this cousin had a bunch of dirt bikes. He did a lot of dirt bike competitions. He even went to the X Games for dirt bikes, and my husband and I have been together since we were very young, like 15. And so I have always heard him tell stories about him going out and riding dirt bikes with his cousin and how fun it was. And this man is still telling these stories to this day. And I'm like, dude, you are a 30-something-year-old man. If you want dirt bikes, go out and buy yourself some dang dirt bikes, okay? And so he went out and he got a couple dirt bikes. He brought them home, and he's like excitedly showing them to our children and talking to them about what they can do on the dirt bikes and all the competitions they can get into if they get good on them, and talking about how his cousin ended up going to the X Games for dirt bikes. And my older son is like, well, did he end up medaling in the X Games? And my husband's like, not for dirt bikes, but like 5 years ago, he medaled for some water sport. And then he's like, well, can we go out and ride with him? Is he still riding dirt bikes? And my husband's like, no, he can't ride dirt bikes anymore, because when mom was pregnant with you, he was doing a flip in the air and he fell off of the dirt bike and he almost died. And now he's a paraplegic, so he can't use his legs, so he can't ride dirt bikes. And my younger son turns around and he looks at me and he's like, why is there always a bad story for every good thing in this family? My husband's dad died young from medical malpractice. He had a condition called hemochromatosis, and it got so bad he had to be admitted into the hospital. And while he was in there, they treated it with something that actually made it worse until it killed him, because the condition was much more unknown back then. Actually, 3 years after this happened, they ended up coming out with a treatment for the condition. So if this would not have happened when it did, he would probably still be alive to this day. But since it did happen, it made my mother-in-law a widow before she was 30. So she decided to go back to school and focus on her education, and she decided to pursue a career in the medical field, and she's worked in that industry ever since. Now, after my husband and I had our first child together, she ended up finally getting married again, and so she's been married to my current father-in-law ever since. And last year she was out of town at a medical convention, and he calls her because he's in severe pain, and he's describing his symptoms to her, and she's like, it sounds like you have appendicitis. You need to get to the hospital immediately. So he goes to the hospital and he describes his symptoms to them, and they're like, no, we don't think this is appendicitis. We think you just have kidney stones. And they send him home, and my mother-in-law's like, I definitely don't think that's right. I definitely think that you have appendicitis. And so she keeps as close of an eye on him as she can from being states away, right? And when the symptoms keep getting worse, she ends up sending one of his children over to the house to make him go back to the hospital again, because she thinks his appendix is going to burst. And it ends up bursting before he gets back to the hospital, but because she did that, it ended up saving his life. And it's just interesting to think about the fact that if she had not decided to pursue a career in the medical field after her first husband got killed by medical malpractice, she would now be 2 for 2 on husbands killed by medical malpractice. In the mid-2000s, I used to talk to this emo boy on MySpace and MSN Messenger, and at that point in time, we would download all of our music from this thing called LimeWire, and then we would upload it to iTunes, and then iTunes would tell everybody on MSN Messenger what you were listening to in your headline. So as you were chatting with somebody, it would show them what song you were listening to while you were having that conversation. And I remember the emo boy was going through this Bring Me the Horizon phase at that point in time. He listened to a lot of Bring Me the Horizon, and I remember his favorite song was I Used to Make Out with Medusa, and I remember this specifically because I made a comment about how often he listened to that song. And when I did that, he went into iTunes and he changed the song title from I Used to Make Out with Medusa to I Used to Make Out with Cassie Cutthroat, because Cassie Cutthroat was my MySpace name at the time. And I thought it was like the ultimate cutest thing ever, because every time he listened to that song after that, his MSN Messenger headline was I Used to Make Out with Cassie Cutthroat. Anyways, now it's 2025 and I have a 16-year-old son who absolutely loves Count Your Blessings by Bring Me the Horizon. Like, that's definitely one of his top 3 favorite albums. He gets his music taste from his father. Anyways, every time I hear him playing that song now, I immediately flash back to that night in 2008 where his dad changed the song title to include my name in it, and I can't even tell him about it because he would call us cringy. When I first met my husband in the 2000s, Hondas were all the rage. At least they were for emo kids. I don't know about the other groups, but emos really ate up a lowered Honda with a boom-in sound system. Like, if you could blare your emo music to the point that it made your lowered Honda shake all over the place, They ate that shit up, okay? And my husband had a red Honda Civic hatchback that it was a coupe, and he had lowered it so low that we could not go through drive-throughs in it because of the speed bumps. He had to map out special routes to take to get places to protect his car, because otherwise if he went over the speed bumps, it would scrape his car. And when he did have to go over a speed bump, he would have to do this little special maneuver to get over the speed bump to avoid scraping the car. And then as we got older, we got family cars, and that's primarily what we drive around. And I don't ever go in his little play cars anymore. But we do have a 16-year-old son who just got a Honda Accord. It's a coupe, and it's red, just like his father, of course. And him and his dad decided to go out there and lower the heck out of that thing. And then I had to go in it yesterday to go somewhere with him. And a 12-minute drive became a 30-minute drive because this dude has to take all the special routes to avoid the speed bumps. And at one point we had to go over a speed bump, and I look over, this kid doing the same exact maneuver his dad was doing in 2008. And I'm like, what on earth? We literally had to take a detour through a trailer park to avoid the main roads that had speed bumps in order to get home. So we get home, and I'm telling my husband the story about how long it took to get home, and he just looks at me with the proudest grin on his face, and he's like, but did it feel nostalgic?